My mom sent me a text that said, "You could sell it to help your brother." Not "How are you, Calidora?" Not "We've missed you." Not even a basic "Hey, we saw the photo and wanted to check in." Just that, straight to the point. After 2 years of complete silence, after not a single call or message to ask whether I was alive, whether I was okay, whether I had eaten or slept or fallen apart somewhere nobody could see, that was the first thing she typed. I read it 3 times standing in my own kitchen, in my own house, in a city they didn't even know I lived in until my cousin posted a photo on Instagram. That text told me everything I needed to understand about what I had always been to them. Not a daughter, not a person with a life worth asking about, a backup plan, a resource they forgot existed until someone reminded them it was sitting there. I want to tell you exactly how I got to that moment, and I want to tell you what I did when they showed up at my front door thinking they could walk back in like nothing had happened. Before I get into it, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city or your state in the comments right now. And if you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, if you have ever worked hard and been completely overlooked while someone else got all the attention, hit that like button before we go any further. It helps more people find this story, and trust me, some of them need to hear it. Subscribe if you are new here, because what happens in this story, especially what happens in that living room, is not something you want to miss. Now let me take you back to Jacksonville, Florida, where all of this started. My father's name is Gerald. My mother's name is Patris. My brother is Quad, and he is 7 years older than me. We grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Jacksonville. My dad worked as an electrical technician for most of my childhood. My mom was a bookkeeper at a local school. We were not wealthy, but we were not struggling either. There was food on the table, the mortgage got paid, and the lights stayed on. By most measures, we were fine. But inside that house, there were 2 different families living under one roof. There was Quad's family, and then there was me. Quad was the kind of older brother who got praised for breathing. He made decent grades in high school, and my parents acted like he had invented something. He was charming and loud, and he filled every room he walked into with noise, and my parents loved noise. When Quad dropped out of college after 1 semester to start a cigar business, my dad called it bold. My mom called it entrepreneurial. I remember sitting at the dinner table when he told them, watching their faces light up and thinking, if I had done that, they would have been devastated. I did not drop out of anything. I applied for every scholarship I could find, got a full academic scholarship to study civil engineering, worked a part-time job every weekend to cover my living expenses, and graduated with honors 11 years ago. Not one person from my family was at that graduation. Quad had just signed his first cigar distribution deal with a small club in Miami, and my parents drove up to celebrate with him that same weekend. I walked across that stage with Dorinda, my best friend since freshman year, cheering from the 3rd row. Dorinda was the only person who saw me graduate. She has been the only person who has consistently seen me, period. I want to tell you about 3 specific moments that happened before I finally made the decision to leave, because each one was worse than the one before, and together, they paint a picture that I think a lot of people watching this are going to recognize. The first moment happened about 4 years before I left. I drove down to Jacksonville for a long weekend. I was a project coordinator at the time, doing well, growing in my career. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my car made a grinding noise I had been trying to ignore for 2 weeks. By the time I turned the engine off, I knew the brake pads were completely shot. I got out, opened the hood, checked what I could, and got on my hands and knees in the driveway to look at the undercarriage. My dad was inside watching football. He did not come out once in the 2 hours I was out there. Our neighbor, a retired man named Terence who lived 2 doors down, walked over and asked if I needed a hand. He was the one who helped me figure out what needed to be fixed. He let me borrow his tools. He offered to drive me to the auto parts store. My own father did not open the front door once. That night at dinner, my dad looked over and asked, "Car running okay now?" I said yes. He went back to eating. "No, are you okay?" "No, good job figuring that out. Just a logistical question to confirm the inconvenience had been resolved." The second moment was the following summer at a family barbecue at my parents' house. I had driven down again, and I spent most of that afternoon doing what I usually did at family gatherings. I set up the folding tables, I seasoned and marinated the meat, I managed the grill for 3 hours, I refilled the ice coolers, and I washed dishes in between courses. Quad sat at the main table the entire afternoon talking about his business. He had started supplying cigars to a club in South Beach, and everyone at that table was hanging on every word like he was describing a moon landing. At one point I carried out a full tray of ribs I had been cooking for over 2 hours. I set it down in the center of the table. Nobody said thank you. My mom looked up from Quad's story just long enough to say, "Calidora, go get your brother some more water." I went and got the water. I set it down next to Quad. He did not look up. The third moment is the one that finally broke something in me for good. I had just been promoted to senior project manager. My salary went up to $75,000 a year, which at that point in my career felt enormous. I had worked for 3 years to earn that title. I bought a small cake from the bakery I liked, drove down to Jacksonville on a Friday afternoon, and walked into my parents' kitchen with the box in my hands. My dad was in the living room watching a game. My mom was on the phone. I set the cake box on the counter and said, "Dad, Mom, I need to tell you something. I got promoted, senior project manager." My dad turned his head slightly and said, "Good," without moving his eyes from the screen. My mom held up one finger in my direction, the universal signal for wait, and kept talking. I stood in that kitchen for a few minutes, then I sat down at the table, then I waited. About 5 minutes later, my mom walked in and her entire face changed. She was suddenly animated, excited, talking fast. I thought for 1 second she had processed what I said and was about to respond. She was not. "Quad just signed a contract with a cigar club in Miami," she said. "A real club, Calidora, not just a little shop. This is huge for him." She picked up her phone to call my dad into the room, and the two of them stood there for the next 10 minutes talking about Quad's deal, calling his phone, leaving him a voicemail to tell him how proud they were. The cake stayed in the box. That night I sat alone in my old bedroom. The same bedroom I had grown up in, the same narrow space with the same window facing the neighbor's fence. And I made a decision that was not dramatic, not loud, and not emotional. It was just clear. I was done waiting for them to see me. I called Dorinda that night. I told her what had happened. She listened to the whole thing and then she said, "Cal, you have been auditioning for a role in your own family for 30 years and they keep giving it to someone else. Stop auditioning." I wrote that down on a piece of paper and put it in my wallet. 3 weeks later, I started making phone calls. I did not announce that I was leaving. I did not have a dramatic conversation or issue any warnings or give anyone a chance to talk me out of it. I had learned a long time ago that the people who dismiss you in small moments will also find a way to dismiss the big ones if you let them be part of them. I rented a moving truck for a Friday night. I called Dorinda and asked if she could help me load it. She showed up at 10 p.m. with coffee and did not ask a single unnecessary question. By 2 in the morning, my apartment in Jacksonville was empty. I drove through the night. Before I left, I sent my parents a text message. It said, "I am moving, I need some time for myself, I will be in touch when I am ready." Then I turned off my phone. I had already arranged an internal transfer with my company 3 weeks before. There was a project manager position available at the Raleigh, North Carolina office, and I had applied for it quietly, interviewed over video call, and been offered the position without telling anyone in my family. It was not impulsive. It was planned. I found a small 1-bedroom apartment in Raleigh and signed a 6-month lease. I kept my head down and I worked. The 18 months I spent in Raleigh changed everything. The first major project I managed on my own was the construction oversight on a $12 million commercial office building on the outskirts of the city. The project had a tight deadline and a history of going over budget under the previous manager. I restructured the subcontractor schedule, renegotiated 2 supply contracts, and brought the project to completion 2 weeks ahead of schedule. We came in $1.2 million under the projected cost overrun. The company saved money they had already mentally spent. Marcus Holt, the CEO, flew in personally to walk the completed site. He shook my hand and said, "I have been in this industry for 20 years and I have not seen a first solo project managed this cleanly." I thanked him. I did not cry, though I wanted to. 6 months after the Raleigh project wrapped, I was promoted again. Regional Operations Manager, responsible for overseeing all construction projects across the Southeast. My compensation package moved to $120,000 per year, plus performance bonuses and an equity stake in the company. Marcus told me the role required me to be based in Birmingham, Alabama, where the regional office was located. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The company covered my relocation costs and paid for 3 months of temporary housing while I found a permanent place. I found it in the Forest Park neighborhood in Birmingham, 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a backyard with enough space to actually breathe. I put 20% down myself. I signed the papers alone at the title company and drove home with the keys in my hand. 2 months after moving into that house, I bought the Porsche Cayenne, midnight blue. I had seen it in a showroom window about a year earlier when I was still in Raleigh, and I had said to myself someday had come. I paid cash for a significant portion of it and financed the rest at a rate that cost me less per month than my Jacksonville apartment had. I was not buying it to show anyone anything. There was no one to show. I bought it because I had told myself I would, and I had learned that I was the only person whose word I could consistently count on. I met Renwick at an industry conference in Atlanta about 8 months after I settled into Birmingham. He is a structural engineer who runs his own firm specializing in building inspections and structural assessments. We were seated next to each other during a panel discussion on sustainable construction practices. He asked a question during the queue, and that I thought was exactly the right question. Afterward, I told him so. We had dinner that same evening. He moved to Birmingham 6 months later. We got engaged 3 months before my family showed up at my door. Dorinda was the only person from my old life who knew where I was. I had changed my phone number 6 months after leaving Jacksonville. I was not on Facebook. I was not on Instagram. I did not exist in the digital version of my family's world, and for 2 full years not one person made enough effort to actually find me. No one hired a lawyer. No one filed a missing persons report. No one drove to Raleigh to knock on doors. The silence from them confirmed everything the cake box had already told me. I want to be clear about something because I think it matters. I did not leave to punish anyone. I left because I needed to find out who I was when nobody was failing to notice me. And what I found out was that I was a great deal more than I had been given credit for. I was not running away from something. I was running toward something. There is a difference. My cousin Chloe is 24 years old. She is the daughter of my mother's older sister, Lorraine, and she and I were genuinely close when we were kids. She is not a bad person. She did not do what she did out of malice. She simply did not know. Chloe was visiting Birmingham with 2 friends for a long weekend in late spring. They were doing the kind of aimless touring that people in their mid-20s do, driving around, finding good food, taking photos. On Saturday afternoon, they happened to drive through Forest Park. Chloe saw the midnight blue Porsche Cayenne sitting in the driveway of a house on my street and slowed down because she thought it was a beautiful car. Then she looked at the house. Then she looked at the woman in the front yard cutting the grass near the flower bed. She rolled down her window and called my name. I looked up. We stood in the driveway for about 20 minutes catching up. It was genuinely nice. She had grown up. I invited her and her friends inside for cold water and snacks before they continued their afternoon. They stayed for about 45 minutes. The house was cool, and the living room windows faced the backyard, not the street, but from the angle Chloe was sitting, she had a clear view through the side window to where the Porsche sat in the driveway. She took a photo, herself on my couch, the sunlit room around her, and just visible through the window, the rear quarter panel of the Porsche. She posted it to her Instagram story with the caption, "Ran into my cousin Cal, she is absolutely thriving." She tagged the neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama. She did not tell me she posted it. She had no reason to think it would matter. Within 72 hours, my life changed in a way I had been quietly bracing for, without knowing exactly when it would arrive. Lorraine saw the story and sent a screenshot to Patris. Patris sent it to Gerald. Gerald forwarded it to Quad. I started getting calls from numbers I did not recognize. I did not answer them. Then a message came through on iMessage from my mother's old number, which my phone still had stored from years ago. "Calidora, this is Mom. I need to speak with you." Then the text that I read standing in my kitchen, the one I told you about at the beginning. "You could sell it to help your brother." Then a message from Gerald. "You disappeared from this family for 2 years without a word, and now we find out you are living like this. We need to talk." Then a message from Quad. "Cal, we need to talk, family stuff, call me." And then an email to my work address, which Quad had apparently found through my LinkedIn profile, from my cousin Ronan. Ronan is the son of my dad's brother Dennis. I had not seen Ronan in nearly 6 years. His email read, Hey Cal, heard through the family that you are doing really well down there. That is great. I'm actually going through a rough patch financially right now. Nothing crazy, just a short-term situation. I was thinking maybe we could catch up sometime and maybe you could help me out with a loan, something around $15,000. Family takes care of family, right? Let me know. I read every single message. I did not respond to one. That evening I showed Renwick all of them. He read through each one carefully, then he looked at me and said, "What do you want to do?" Not what he thought I should do, not what he would do in my position. He asked what I wanted. That is the kind of man he is. I called Dorinda. She had already seen Chloe's story and had been waiting to hear from me. "Are you okay?" she asked. I told her I was. I told her I had known this moment was coming eventually in some form and that I had already been thinking about what it would mean when it arrived. She said, "How are you feeling actually?" And I said, "Clear, I feel clear." 1 week after Chloe posted that photo, on a Saturday morning, Renwick was in the kitchen making coffee, and I was at my desk in the home office working through project documentation when the doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera feed on my phone. Gerald, Patris, Quad. All three of them, standing at my front gate in Birmingham, Alabama. They had flown down from Jacksonville without calling ahead, without sending a message to ask if they could come, without any indication that they understood this was my home and not a place they had any right to simply show up at. I sat there looking at the camera for a moment, then I sent a text to Renwick, "They are here." He walked out of the kitchen, sat down in the living room chair and did not say a word. He was simply there. I walked to the front door and opened it. Patris came in first and wrapped her arms around me before I could say anything. "Mom missed you so much," she said in the third person, as if she were speaking about someone else's feelings. I stood still. I did not raise my arms. Gerald walked in behind her and looked around the living room slowly. He said, "Nice place," the way people say it when they are trying to figure out what something cost. He walked past Renwick without acknowledging him. Quad came in last. He was wearing a new polo shirt and carrying a shopping bag from a store at the airport. He looked relaxed. He smiled at me and said, "Hey, Cal," like we had seen each other 2 weeks ago. They settled into the living room. Renwick was already seated. Nobody introduced themselves. Patris started with the soft language. She said they had been worried about me. She said disappearing like that had hurt the family. She said family was supposed to stay connected no matter what. She said she understood that I might have needed space, but 2 years was too long and they loved me, and they wanted things to go back to normal. Gerald nodded along. Quad looked at the ceiling. I let them finish, all of it. I did not interrupt once. When Patris stopped talking, there was a pause, and then Gerald shifted forward and said what they had actually come to say. Quad's cigar business was in serious trouble. He owed more than $500,000 to suppliers and distributors. He needed capital to keep the company from collapsing. Gerald said it plainly. They wanted me to loan Quad $500,000. Quad leaned forward then and looked at me directly for the first time since walking in. "It is just a loan, Cal. You clearly have it. You have this house, you have that car sitting outside. You can afford to help. I would do it for you." Then Patris added the second request. She said the house was large for one person and that if I did not want to be alone in it, they would be willing to move in and help me with the expenses. They were having some financial difficulties of their own, she said. It would work out for everyone. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "Can I ask you something first?" I looked at my father. "Dad, what position did I get promoted to about 3 years ago? I drove down to Jacksonville to tell you in person." Gerald blinked. He shifted in his seat. He said nothing. I looked at my mother. "Mom, what state do I live in? What city?" Patris looked at Gerald quickly, then back at me. "Alabama," she said. "Birmingham, right." "You did not know that until Chloe posted a photo," I said. "You did not know because you never asked." I looked at Quad. "When did I graduate from college?" He shrugged one shoulder. "I do not know, 10 years ago maybe. 11 years ago, with honors. I was the first person in this family to graduate from a 4-year university with an engineering degree. None of you were there. You were in Miami celebrating a cigar deal." The room was quiet. I stood up and walked to my home office. I came back with a document I had printed 2 days after I received Quad's text message, because I had already suspected the meeting was coming, and I believed in being prepared. I set it on the coffee table in front of Quad. That is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing. It was submitted to the court 5 weeks ago by your company. I know because one of the subcontractors your company owes money to has a long-standing relationship with my firm and brought it to my attention during a project review. I looked at him directly. I already knew about this before any of you reached out to me. I wanted to see whether you would be honest about it when you asked for my help. Quad's face went flat. Gerald started to say something. Calidora, this is a private family matter, and there is no reason to bring documents into this like some kind. I am not finished, I said. He stopped. The doorbell rang. I walked to the front door and opened it. Marcus Holt was standing on my front step. We had scheduled a Saturday morning working session weeks earlier to review the scope of a new regional project. He was right on time. I invited him in. He stepped into the living room, registered the presence of 3 people he did not know, and extended his hand to Renwick first. Renwick stood and shook it. Then Marcus looked at me. Am I interrupting something? No, I said. My family was just leaving, but I would like them to meet you before they go. I introduced Marcus by name and title. Then I said, calmly and without any particular emphasis, Marcus, I want to share something with my family while you are here, because they have come to ask me to sell my car and loan a significant amount of money to my brother's bankrupt company, and I think some context would be useful. Marcus looked at me for a moment. He is not a man who is easily surprised, but I could see him recalibrate the situation quickly. He nodded. I said, could you tell them in general terms what my role involves and what you know about my financial position? He straightened slightly and spoke the way he speaks in boardrooms, measured and clear. Calidora is one of the most capable people I have worked with in 20 years in this industry. The project she delivered in Raleigh 2 years ago saved this company $1.2 million in projected overruns. She has since managed a regional portfolio worth nearly $40 million in active construction value. Her current compensation, including salary, performance bonuses, and her equity stake in the company, puts her personal net worth at just over $4 million. He paused. She built that herself, every dollar of it. The room was completely silent. Patrice's mouth opened. She closed it. She looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the document on the coffee table. Quad looked at the floor. I looked at all 3 of them and I said, I built everything in this house, everything in that driveway, and everything in my career without a single phone call from any of you asking how it was going. You were silent for 2 years. You showed up today not because you missed me. You showed up because a photo reminded you I existed and you calculated that I might be useful. I walked to the front door and opened it. I need you to leave my home now. Gerald stood up. His mouth was tight. He looked at Renwick, who had not spoken a single word the entire time but who stood when Gerald stood, and something about that made Gerald stop trying to find something to say. They left. I closed the door. Marcus looked at me and said, Do you need a few minutes before we start? I said, No, I am good. Let us get to work. 3 months passed. Quad's company completed its bankruptcy process. The court liquidated the business assets to partially repay the outstanding supplier debts. His wife, Sherry, filed for divorce and moved back to her hometown in Georgia with their 2 children. The house Quad and Sherry had owned in Jacksonville had been put up as collateral against a business loan 2 years earlier. When the company failed, the bank moved to collect. The last I heard through Dorinda, Quad was living in a friend's spare room in Savannah. Gerald and Patrice lost their Jacksonville house as well. I found this out not from them directly but from Dorinda, who had heard it through Chloe. It turned out that over the years my parents had quietly depleted a substantial portion of their savings and retirement accounts, funneling money into Quad's various business ventures. The mortgage had been refinanced twice to pull out equity. When their own financial cushion was gone and the neighborhood property taxes went up, they could not keep up with the payments. The bank foreclosed. They were renting a 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Jacksonville. 2 months after the confrontation at my house, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I answered it because I had developed the habit of answering unknown numbers for work. It was Patrice. She had gotten a new phone. She said she had been trying to figure out how to call me for weeks. She was crying within the first minute. She said she was sorry. She said she had not understood for a long time what she had been doing, or more precisely what she had been failing to do. She said she thought about the graduation she had missed, the promotion she had not acknowledged, the cake I had brought to the house that nobody touched. She said the word sorry more times in that call than I had heard it from her in 30 years combined. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt her. I did not rush her along. When she finished, I said, "Mom, I believe that you mean what you are saying right now. I do. But being sorry does not undo 11 years of being invisible in my own family. I am not refusing to talk to you because I want to punish you. I am setting a boundary because I have finally learned that I am allowed to have one. I need you to understand those are two different things." She asked, "Is there any chance you could give us another opportunity to do things differently?" I said, "Not right now, possibly not ever. I am not going to make a promise either way. What I am going to do is take care of myself." I ended the call. I sat for a few minutes in the quiet of my home office. Then I texted Dorinda. She called. Dorinda responded immediately. "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. I typed back, like I put something down that I had been carrying for a very long time. Not happy exactly, just lighter. Renwick and I got married 4 months later. The wedding was small, 40 people at a garden venue outside of Birmingham. Dorinda was my maid of honor. Marcus Holt attended with his wife. Several of my colleagues from the regional office came. We had good food and the evening was warm, and Renwick danced badly and laughed about it, and I thought, this is what I chose, and I chose right. There was no one from my family of origin in attendance. That was not a decision I made out of bitterness. It was a decision I made because the people in that room were the people who had actually shown up for me, and I had learned the hard way that showing up is not optional. It is the whole point. If you have stayed with me through this entire story, I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever worked hard for something and had the people closest to you fail to notice? Have you ever sat in a room full of your own family and felt like you were not really there? And when that happened, what did you do? Did you stay and keep waiting? Or did you eventually decide that your life was worth building with or without their attention? I want to read your answers. Drop them in the comments below, every single one. Because I think a lot of people watching this are carrying something similar, and sometimes it helps just to say it out loud, even to strangers on the internet. If this story reached you in some way, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit the like button so that more people can find it. And if you are not subscribed yet, please do that now, because every week there is a new story here about people who refuse to stay small, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope that wherever you are and whatever you are carrying right now, you know that building a life on your own terms is never something you have to apologize for. My name is Calidora Voss, not Cal, not the quiet one, not the one who cooked and cleaned and got promoted and moved away and was expected to get over it. I am Calidora Voss, and I decided a long time ago that I was going to build a life that did not need anyone's permission to exist. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.